Grace, a young woman from a small town, was known for her strong faith. After moving to the city for work, she felt disconnected from her spiritual life and began searching for a church to attend. One Sunday, she stumbled upon the Divine Gate Ministry, a massive, brightly lit church with thousands of attendees. Intrigued by its grandeur, Grace decided to attend a service. The charismatic pastor, Apostle Judah, preached with fire and authority, performing miracles that left the congregation in awe. Grace felt a pull, convinced she had found her spiritual home. Little did she know, behind the powerful sermons lay a web of secrets. Grace quickly became a devoted member, attending every service and donating generously. During her third visit, she witnessed Apostle Judah heal a wheelchair-bound woman who stood and danced before the congregation. The crowd erupted in praise, solidifying Grace's belief in the church's divine power. However, something about the woman's expressions seemed off. As Grace walked home, she couldn't shake the feeling. Her best friend, Chioma, warned her to be cautious, reminding her of fake prophets, but Grace dismissed the concerns, believing Chioma was jealous of her newfound spiritual path. During a midweek service, Apostle Judah claimed to have received a prophecy about Grace's life. He described details of her past and promised her great wealth if she remained faithful to the ministry. The prophecy amazed Grace and the congregation, but Chioma was skeptical. Chioma decided to attend a service with Grace to see for herself. To her surprise, Apostle Judah seemed to know details about her life as well. This left Chioma unnerved, but Grace was thrilled, convinced that God had revealed their lives to the apostle. Weeks passed, and Grace noticed that the church demanded excessive donations, often disguised as seed sowing. Apostle Judah preached about giving sacrificially to unlock blessings. Grace, desperate for financial breakthrough, gave beyond her means, even borrowing money to donate. Chioma confronted Grace about the church's financial demands, pointing out how Apostle Judah and his ministers lived lavishly. Grace defended the church, arguing that God was blessing them for their service. Yet, deep down, a seed of doubt began to grow. The church organized a week-long healing revival, attracting people from across the country. Grace volunteered to assist and witnessed miracles daily. Blind people regained sight, and others were freed from demonic possession. The testimonies overwhelmed her. One night, Grace overheard a heated argument between two ministers. They mentioned paying actors for the miracles. Her heart sank, but she quickly dismissed it, convincing herself she had misunderstood. Apostle Judah was too anointed for such deceit, she thought. Determined to uncover the truth, Chioma began researching Apostle Judah's past. She discovered several allegations of fraud and misconduct, all dismissed by the church as attacks from the devil. Chioma shared her findings with Grace, but Grace refused to listen. Feeling helpless, Chioma decided to attend a private counseling session with Apostle Judah to get closer to the truth. She hoped to expose him, but her efforts led to unexpected complications. During her session, Apostle Judah accused Chioma of carrying a spiritual curse that hindered her success. He offered to deliver her for a hefty fee. Chioma played along, agreeing to pay later, but secretly recorded their conversation. When Chioma revealed the recording to Grace, her friend was shaken but still hesitant. She needed more proof to accept that her spiritual sanctuary was a scam. A chance encounter at the market brought Grace face to face with a wheelchair-bound woman from the miracle service. The woman looked healthier than ever, but when Grace greeted her, she seemed uneasy. After some coaxing, the woman confessed she had been paid to act crippled and healed during the service. She explained how the church preyed on vulnerable people for staged miracles. Grace felt her world crumble but decided to confront Apostle Judah herself. When Grace confronted Apostle Judah, he laughed off her accusations, claiming the woman was mentally unstable. He warned Grace against questioning his authority, saying it was equivalent to challenging God. Fearful of divine punishment, Grace withdrew her accusations, but her trust was shaken. Despite her doubts, Grace continued attending services, hoping for clarity. Apostle Judah began preaching about obedience, emphasizing the danger of questioning spiritual leaders. During a private prayer session, Grace witnessed Apostle Judah using strange symbols and chanting unfamiliar words. He called it a higher level of prayer, but it felt dark and unsettling. As Grace shared her concerns with Chioma, they began piecing together the strange happenings. Could the church be involved in something more sinister than fraud? Determined to find solid evidence, Grace volunteered to help clean the church. During her duties, she noticed a heavily locked room labeled Sanctuary of Secrets. Intrigued, she asked about it, but the other volunteers avoided the topic, brushing her off. Late at night, Grace and Chioma sneaked into the church and picked the lock. Inside, they found shocking evidence: stacks of forged testimonies, props used in fake miracles, and even videos of rehearsals for staged healings. They also discovered occult symbols and artifacts that sent chills down their spines. Chioma's investigations revealed Apostle Judah's connections to a secretive cult known for blending religion with dark practices. The cult promised wealth and influence to its members in exchange for human sacrifices disguised as deliverance rituals. Grace was horrified to realize that many congregants who had disappeared after special prayers were likely victims. Her faith in Apostle Judah was completely shattered, but she knew exposing him would require a carefully planned approach. Grace struggled with fear. Apostle Judah seemed omnipresent, often delivering sermons that felt like direct threats to her and Chioma. His influence over the congregation made him untouchable, and his warnings about betrayers added to Grace's paranoia. Chioma encouraged Grace to stand firm, reminding her of the lives at stake. Together, they devised a plan to gather more evidence and report the church to the authorities. During a testimony session, Grace noticed a woman who looked terrified as she spoke about being delivered from a curse. The woman stumbled over her words and glanced nervously at Apostle Judah. Grace approached her afterward and learned she was being blackmailed into lying about her experience. The woman revealed that her husband had gone missing after attending a private deliverance session. Grace and Chioma promised to help her, vowing to find the truth about her husband's disappearance. Realizing they couldn't do it alone, Grace and Chioma began discreetly speaking to other skeptical congregants. They discovered a handful of people who had noticed the inconsistencies but were too afraid to speak out. With their help, Grace and Chioma started collecting testimonies and building a case against Apostle Judah. They knew they needed undeniable evidence to bring him down. One of the church's former ministers, Pastor Emmanuel, agreed to meet with Grace and Chioma. He shared horrifying details about the inner workings of the ministry, including the sacrifices demanded by the cult. Emmanuel tried to flee the city after their meeting but was intercepted by the church's enforcers. His sudden disappearance sent a clear message: Apostle Judah would go to any lengths to protect his empire. Grace's faith was deeply shaken. How could a place claiming to serve God be so corrupt? She turned to her Bible for answers, finding solace in stories of perseverance and justice. Chioma, though less religious, admired Grace's resilience and vowed to stand by her side. The duo decided to leak some of the evidence they had gathered online, hoping to attract the attention of investigative journalists. The leaked evidence went viral, sparking outrage and debates across social media. While some defended the church, others demanded an investigation. Apostle Judah dismissed the claims as attacks from agents of darkness. Despite the backlash, Grace and Chioma received messages from former members and victims willing to come forward. The momentum encouraged them to push harder. A prominent investigative journalist, Tundalabi, reached out to Grace and Chioma. He had been following the church for years but lacked sufficient evidence to publish a report. With their help, Tun began working on a documentary to expose the Divine Gate ministry. The trio knew time was running out. Apostle Judah was growing increasingly suspicious, and his sermons became more threatening. Grace and Chioma began receiving anonymous threats. Their homes were vandalized, and Grace's employer fired her without explanation. Apostle Judah's influence seemed to reach every corner of their lives. Despite the intimidation, they pressed on, knowing the truth needed to be revealed. Tund advised them to go into hiding until the documentary was complete. Grace discovered that Apostle Judah was planning a massive sacrificial service to cleanse the church of traitors. Fearing for the safety of their allies, Grace and Chioma decided to warn the police. The police were initially reluctant to act, but with mounting evidence and public pressure, they agreed to monitor the event. On the day of the service, the police raided the church. Chaos erupted as officers arrested Apostle Judah and his top ministers. Grace and Chioma watched from the crowd, relieved but shaken by the violence and fear that unfolded. The raid revealed shocking details about the church's activities, including missing persons, financial fraud, and occult practices. The media coverage ensured that the church's influence began to crumble. However, Apostle Judah's followers remained divided, with some believing he was a victim of persecution. Grace faced backlash from loyalists, but she stood firm. The trial of Apostle Judah began with massive media coverage. Victims shared harrowing testimonies, revealing how they were manipulated, extorted, and even harmed in the name of deliverance. Despite overwhelming evidence, Apostle Judah maintained his innocence, portraying himself as a victim of a spiritual attack. Many of his loyal followers protested outside the courthouse, chanting prayers for his release. Grace and Chioma faced harassment from his supporters, who accused them of working for the devil. It was a painful reminder of how deeply people could be blinded by faith in a manipulative leader. Further investigations exposed Apostle Judah's connections to the secretive cult. Financial records linked him to offshore accounts used to launder money, while former members of the cult revealed its operations, including how the church funneled funds to sustain its practices. The authorities uncovered a grim discovery: a secret underground chamber beneath the church. It contained ceremonial objects and evidence of the dark rituals conducted there. The shocking revelation turned even some of his staunch supporters against him. The most damning evidence came from one of Apostle Judah's closest ministers, Pastor Michael, who decided to cooperate with the authorities in exchange for leniency. He revealed the full extent of the church's fraudulent activities, including how miracles were staged and members silenced. Grace and Chioma watched as Pastor Michael's confession played in court. It was a bittersweet moment. Justice was within reach, but the betrayal hurt many who once looked up to the ministry. The congregation of the Divine Gate Ministry was left shattered. Some members sought genuine places of worship, while others struggled to accept the truth. Grace began counseling a few former members, sharing her journey of rediscovering her faith. Chioma, now a respected advocate against religious exploitation, encouraged Grace to start a foundation to help victims of spiritual abuse. Together, they laid the groundwork for their mission to protect others from falling prey to manipulative leaders. After weeks of testimonies and evidence, Apostle Judah was convicted on multiple charges, including fraud, human rights violations, and cult-related activities. He received a life sentence, and his church was permanently shut down. Grace and Chioma attended the sentencing, feeling a mixture of relief and sorrow. While justice was served, they couldn't ignore the pain inflicted on so many lives. They vowed to use their experiences to educate others about the dangers of blind faith. Grace embarked on a personal journey to heal from the trauma. She joined a small, genuine faith community and found solace in prayer and reflection. Through her experiences, she learned to separate true faith from manipulation, focusing on her personal relationship with God. Chioma, though less religious, admired Grace's resilience and dedication. The two friends grew closer, their bond strengthened by their shared mission to bring light to others. Together, they began hosting workshops and creating content to educate people about identifying red flags in religious institutions. Years later, Grace stood on a podium addressing a large audience. Her foundation, Faithful Paths, had grown into a nationwide movement advocating for transparency and accountability in religious organizations. She spoke passionately about her journey, urging people to seek truth and wisdom in their spiritual pursuits. Chioma, now a respected journalist, documented their story, ensuring it reached a global audience. Their efforts inspired countless people to examine their faith critically and avoid exploitative leaders. As Grace looked at the crowd, she felt a sense of peace. She had turned her pain into purpose, using her story to bring hope to others. Her message was clear: faith should heal, not harm. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Kindly share, subscribe, and hit the bell button for more stories like this.